unmute. Do you want to be on video? There you go. No? Okay. Stop video.
So when's the meeting start? 2 minutes?
Yeah, it's 6.
Hi, Lisa. I think you're stuck in muted mode, no?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi,
Yeah.
nice to see you.
Good to see you. Yeah.
We'll give people a couple more minutes to join in and hi, Doug, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We're just going to wait a couple of minutes here and give people time to join. Everybody's kind of coming in at the last minute. So
Yeah, great to see some familiar faces.
and I believe Charlie Shore sent regards to you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So said they miss you terribly. So
Yeah.
all right. Okay. Still give it a couple minutes and we'll go.
I'm going to mute myself until needed because I have 2 little dogs at home that tend to, when I start speaking, often they will speak as well.
They help.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah. You'll know when it's time. Okay. So I think even though I'm sure we'll have more people joining, I think we'll go ahead and get started so that we can respect everybody's time this evening. Welcome to the second presentation organized by the Initiative on Community Engagement. This is a project sponsored jointly by the Queen Anne Block Captains Network and the Queen Anne Community Council. I'm Paula Mueller, co-chair of the initiative with Beth Bonnell. Tonight we're hosting a conversation with Kara Lauer of the Queen Anne Helpline, an organization working to help prevent homelessness. In addition, Kara has invited 2 representatives from the faith community whose organizations are supporters of Helpline, Pastor Dan Peterson of Queen Anne Lutheran Church and Pastor Doug Early of Queen Anne Presbyterian Church. So welcome to all of you. Our program this evening will be a moderated discussion about Queen Anne Helpline with some brief comments following from Pastors Peterson and Early. I'm going to share my screen for a few minutes and we'll pull up some slides and do a little housekeeping here. Okay. So generally, we will follow the agenda that you see here. We'll have our speakers and then we'll open it up for a question and answer session and end the meeting promptly at 7 o'clock. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Initiative on Community Engagement, this was an idea that Beth and I formulated based on what we saw as a need in the community. We created the initiative with the following goals in mind: to bring information to the Queen Anne community about topics that impact our neighborhood, to facilitate presentations and conversations with organizations that are working to build well thought out programs and solutions to our community issues, to provide a forum for dialogue between our residents, city officials, and other organizations, and most importantly, promote the active participation of Queen Anne residents in helping build an even better neighborhood. So before we get started, I would like to cover a few Zoom basics. Those of you who are familiar with Zoom, that's great. Voice is definitely muted throughout the presentation until our question and answer session. You may or may not want to mute your video as well. Chat will be open during the presentation and Beth is monitoring chat. And you can post questions and comments there. To turn on chat, if you don't know, there's a little icon in the middle lower part of your screen. You can click on that and the chat box should appear somewhere on your computer. Remember, everyone can see what you post on chat, so please keep comments and questions courteous. The meeting is being recorded, so that recording will be made available to view or download within a few days. And finally, in the next week or so, you'll get an email with several pieces of information from us, including the location of the video, copies of documents that are presented this evening, and other helpful information pertinent to this presentation. Our guests this evening are Kara Lauer, Executive Director of Queen Anne Helpline, Pastor Daniel Peterson of Queen Anne Lutheran Church, and Pastor Doug Early of Queen Anne Presbyterian Church. Kara Lauer is the Executive Director of Queen Anne Helpline and is responsible for overseeing the administration, programs, and strategic plan for the organization, as well as driving fundraising, marketing, and community outreach. Kara did her undergraduate and graduate work at Stanford, studying psychological changes across adulthood and what gets better with age. Thank you, Kara. Since returning to her hometown of Seattle, she has worked in a variety of human services roles, including nearly a decade at Sound Generations, then called Senior Services, and 2 years as the Executive Director of Elderwise. To Queen Anne Helpline, she brings the memory of her grandmother, Faye Carey Rice, who grew up in and loved Queen Anne, as well as her 4-year-old daughter, Maggie, who loves that we can all be helpers. Pastor Daniel Peterson is with us from Queen Anne Lutheran Church. Prior to his arrival in Queen Anne Lutheran, Pastor Peterson taught as Professor of Humanities at Seattle University. He's also a published author of books, articles, and blogs, including an award-winning book on Paul Tillich, published by Lutheran University Press. While Pastor Dan is thoroughly anchored in the Lutheran tradition, he also encourages spiritual questioning as a means to strengthen faith. And Pastor Doug Early of Queen Anne Presbyterian Church. Pastor Early has been the pastor of Queen Anne Presbyterian since 1997. He received his BA from the University of Washington and his master's in divinity from Regent College in Vancouver, British Columbia. Doug is also the author of Abide in Me, Being Fully Alive in Christ, published by Wipf and Stock. Both Reverend Early and his wife Andrea were born and raised in the Puget Sound area. So before I launch into the interview with Kara, I just want to take a few minutes to give you a sense of the scope of the work that Helpline does. These numbers are from 2019, and I'm sure that the need has grown. During that year, Helpline served 2,172 separate households and 2,859 individuals. 771 individuals received emergency financial assistance, and they provided over 3,000 transportation vouchers, over 8,000 pieces of clothing, linens, and hygiene products, and 850 meals. That's a remarkable amount and array of services and assistance for our community. So we certainly thank you for that. I'm going to stop screen sharing now. So Kara, last month our program focused on creating permanent supportive housing for the chronically homeless. Can you talk to us about the mission of Queen Anne Helpline and how that is different?
Yeah, thank you, Paula and Beth, for inviting me for this second section. It's really a complementary focus to that first session. I'm glad that people are knowing what permanent supportive housing is and recognizing the need to get people, the need to build affordable housing in general, but specifically permanent supportive housing, that's getting some attention and some dollars attached to it. Our focus is really less on moving people from homelessness, from experiencing homelessness to stable housing, than it is keeping people in stable housing. So if we succeed, the results of our work are largely invisible. It means your neighbors are going about their days and able to stay in their homes and have their basic needs met. So for a number of reasons, we don't have a neon sign in front of our offices. We're located sort of near Bite Box and Five Corners Hardware on McGraw. A lot of people don't, say they've driven by our offices for decades and never known where we were. That's where we are, and we're on 3 different bus lines from downtown, so that people don't feel shamed, honestly, to access our services, to come in and talk with us, have a human conversation, and talk with us about what's going on and how we can help. So for donors, we're we don't want to be a best kept secret, but that's why we are fairly discreet, so that we don't create a barrier for people who are accessing our services. Yeah, so thank you for inviting me. I'm not sure, I can talk about our mission is preventing homelessness, as I mentioned, and stabilizing the lives of neighbors in need with financial and supportive services. So financial services are limited to people in 3 zip codes, 98119, 98109, 98199. So that's roughly Queen Anne, Magnolia, South Lake Union. And our supportive services include all kinds of things, food, clothing, bus tickets, referral resources, hygiene items, so all kinds of things. And that's open to everyone who can get to our office. Or these days, everyone who's living within those 3 zip codes that we can deliver to, sort of in this COVID era. So supportive services are open to everyone, and financial assistance is limited to those 3 zip codes. And that is really focused on, the financial assistance is not direct cash payments. It's assistance focused on homelessness prevention and moving people into stable housing. So it's mostly rent and utility assistance, and then sometimes move-in assistance if people are sort of short on the amount of funds needed to move in, deposits and first month's rent. we know that moving costs are a real barrier to getting out of a bad situation or moving into a better situation. So we can help in that arena as well.
Great. What happens when people come to you for services that Helpline doesn't provide? And then also, if you want to talk a little bit about the results that you have with your programs, that would be great.
Yeah, so you talked about, thank you for throwing out a few numbers there in the beginning. And as I mentioned, really our results are largely invisible if we're doing a good job. It means it looks like our community is a little bit more healthy and less fragmented than we know it is. Connecting, one thing that we sort of measure success by is connecting the kind of good impulses of neighbors to help, people who have more than they need and are willing to support our efforts with, the many people who need the help. So we think that healthy community is interdependent community. And that means that we are responsible to and for each other. And so that means, for example, one of the shifts that we're making organizationally is from being primarily dependent on big fundraising events. So even before COVID, we were moving from that to more individual donors, thinking about like, how does Queen Anne Helpline fit into my monthly budget? How am I part of this community? Am I sort of mostly just extracting resources or am I kind of giving? Am I part of a regenerative community in which everybody, all of my neighbors are able to thrive and able to fully contribute? So I'm happy to say that in this COVID era, we've sort of fast-tracked that shift, and a whole lot of people, new donors and folks who used to be connected with us who weren't for years, have come back and said like, yeah, it's time. It's time.
Yeah.
And I think the sort of racial reckoning that we're in the midst of as well has kind of shaped our work. And, I know for myself, it was the beginning of the COVID era when I started making a regular donation to Real Rent to the Duwamish tribe. That's something I've been thinking about for years. But I think for folks in our zip codes, people are saying, yeah, I kind of know about Queen Anne Helpline, but I'm hearing more about how if you're an essential worker, if you work at a restaurant, if you're a personal care aide, there are so many people who, the bottom kind of fell out. And so for those of us who are privileged enough to shelter in place, to have a secure home to shelter within, feeling like, what is it that is my responsibility beyond that? And just a whole wave of people from Queen Anne, Magnolia, South Union have stepped forward and really heard that ask and responded. Just to give, just to kind of name that in appreciation of the generosity of neighbors. That's sort of the spirit within which the Helpline was founded, was kind of neighbors helping neighbors. And I think the intensity of need has just underlined how important that is.
That's great.
Also, what's in our power to do. So many things we can't do in this period, but one thing we can do, if we have a little bit of excess funds, we can help make sure that we all kind of get through this.
Right. Every little bit helps. I'm sure that the need is growing. And can you give us a little bit of information about the demographic that you're serving, and also a bit about? I mean, we touched on a few numbers, but just a bit about how big the problem really is, both in our community and in general.
Yeah. I'm thankfully, we have a lot of resources nationally, statewide, and local, even down to our council district. We know that a quarter of evictions that happen in Seattle are in District 7. So we can get fairly precise in terms of the need locally. just because of the increased attention to this issue. I think nationally, sociologist Matthew Desmond, who won a Pulitzer in 2017 for his book Evicted, which all of our staff and many of our volunteers and board members have read. It's a good read and a pretty sobering story about eviction. Takes place in Milwaukee, but it really highlights the issue nationally. He's part of the eviction lab at Princeton now. And that's in part because the federal government is not collecting data. And so, there was a need. So a little bit closer to home, UW did an eviction study. You can still read it. There's still resources online. And when we can post links to this stuff. But that's been really helpful in terms of looking at Washington State and King County. And then 2 years ago, the Seattle Women's Commission partnered with the Housing Justice Project, which is a program of the King County Bar Association, to draft and publish a report called Losing Home, which we can also publish a link to. And I highly recommend reading that. That talks about sort of eviction as in terms of disproportionate impacts and how does it play out, who does it affect, what are the drivers, what are the downstream consequences. And that's all really important, I think, background to understand these issues, because we really need to kind of zero in on what's happening, who are we talking about. And so to zero in on our clients specifically, let me look at my numbers. So over half of our clients are people of color. 37% identify as Black or African American, which is also, because we're in this racial reckoning period, something that we're talking about in new and different ways around how is that wildly disproportionate number in terms of the clients that we serve versus representation in these communities. What does that mean? What does that mean about what we're doing and how and who we're serving? 7% of our clients are veterans, little over half are women, 22% are seniors, 22% are also families with children. 37% of our clients live with one or more disabilities. So you can sort of start to get a sense of kind of the intersections that are leading people to I know that the statistic that's been thrown around a lot, and I know our vice president-elect used mentioned in one of the presidential debates about almost half of Americans not being able to afford a $400 emergency. So that's our clients, which is to say almost half of us, if we, life throws something at us that is, a car repair or a medical expense or just something unplanned, we have a hard time responding to that need. So those are our clients often, and now obviously we've all had something thrown at us that we didn't plan for and certainly didn't invite. And then at the same time, I think 30% of renters in Washington, it might be higher than that, but are spending more than are technically rent burdened in the sense that's defined as spending more than 30% of your income on rent. And among low to middle income renters, it's higher than that. So about half of those people are spending more than 50%, and a decent number of them are spending something like 70 or 80% on their income on rent, which is sort of hard to imagine. It takes a lot of resourcefulness to make that work, even under non-pandemic circumstances. And we know that a lot of the why behind that is flat wages for decades and rising rents. So if your wages are flat and your rent keeps going up, excuse me, at some point, one of those $400 emergencies is going to be the one that that you come up short in responding to.
Yeah.
So as I said, we think that healthy community is interdependent community, and that means people have a place to call when they get to that point. And there's an entity. Hopefully, there's an abundance of entities, but we certainly feel like we're one of them. That people can come and say, "This is my situation. I don't know what to do at this point," and we can help. We can help with the immediate needs, but we can also our annual limit is currently at $600. So that's not meeting anybody's rent needs who's in a market rate apartment right now. But it's a piece of the puzzle. And it's also what I've observed is it's also, and we can all relate to having those crisis moments in life that that make us feel that lead us to sort of panic and feel overwhelmed. And those aren't the moments where we're coming up with creative solutions or even thinking rationally at all, right? We're panicked and overwhelmed. So, so when we speak with clients, and our program manager, Lisa, is brilliant at just creating empathy and listening to people's stories and saying, we're going to help you, and just bringing that level of panic and overwhelm down to a point where it's possible for people to kind of see a path forward, to say, okay, well, here are some of the other, puzzle pieces that I can put into play. And here are some things that I wasn't kind of thinking clearly about because of the level of panic and stress. So we're able to help people kind of directly, financially, and in terms of tangible needs, but we're also able to kind of help people get back to a frame of mind where they can do their own constructive problem solving and creative problem solving.
Let's talk about that. You mentioned that people often don't understand the relationship between eviction and homelessness. Why don't you help us understand that a little bit better?
Yeah, so some of those resources that I mentioned are great in terms of kind of painting that picture. But we know that eviction is not just a result of well, certainly not just a result of bad decisions, which is the way that sometimes it gets characterized. Like if people just followed the rules and paid the rent instead of buying avocado toast or whatever it is, that's sort of where the blame is going, then they wouldn't be evicted. That's a myth. And so, as I said earlier, we know that people are broadly rent burdened, and that's getting worse. That people don't have the resilience to respond to kind of the emergencies that just happen to any of us. So yeah, eviction is not just a cause of poverty, but is not just a result of poverty, but is also a cause and of homelessness as well. I think that Losing Home report, I think, says that of the people who were evicted in Seattle in the year that they were studying, 86% ended up homeless. So it's not the reality is not that you get evicted and just go find another place to live. It creates kind of an escalating set of problems. And the eviction process itself leads to people being saddled by attorney's fees and court fees, and even just the machinery of the court process adds another layer of barriers that people have a hard time overcoming.
Right. So what do you think that Helpline is doing well? And what are the challenges that you face primarily?
Yeah, so I think all of us that work in this sector are worried about the eviction moratorium cliff and the sort of nationally all the way through locally, worried about kind of a wave of evictions and homelessness that will result unless there is a fairly extensive relief package that happens at the federal level. So we're working locally, but I think there's kind of a dark backdrop of not knowing what's going to happen at the national level that we're holding. I'll say what we can do is we're in a good position to sort of mediate between tenants and landlords, particularly mom and pop landlords. Larger corporate landlords are harder sometimes to broker deals with, but we want to make a win-win situation happen between landlords and tenants. So, as I mentioned, when people are in this crisis mode, it's like one of the most popular ways to deal with it is to not deal with it. So we often talk with clients about, like if a creditor calls, pick up the phone, and pay what you can pay. So same goes for rent. And so we can often kind of say we can contribute to rent, and we can figure out what our client is able to contribute, and then we can work on developing a payment plan that is that landlord and tenant can agree to sort of stretch out the time horizon and help that person remain stably housed while they work that out.
Right.
So it's another way in which we try to kind of stay human
Right.
in these conversations.
I'm sure that the COVID shutdown has had a big impact on how you work with your clients. Do you want to talk a little bit about that so that we all understand what's happening there?
Yeah, so we pivoted fairly quickly. We're not seeing clients for in-person appointments. So we're staying human in other ways, like we all are trying to do, as exemplified by this meeting tonight. But I think in April, I know that in April, our financial assistance was double what we budgeted. So that was kind of the peak before anybody's unemployment checks came in, or before there was anything else in place. We had a huge spike, and it's remained elevated. But we're in the position to continue helping for as long as the pandemic pans out. The other thing about people not being able to come to see us in the office is we started with staff, and then we kind of brought in a team of volunteers to deliver groceries. So instead of having emergency food in the office, we've been delivering groceries, hygiene supplies, things like masks that have been made, regular supplies of masks that have been made by residents at Bayview. So neighbors in Queen Anne, and all kinds of people. We used to also have packing parties for food for our food program in the office. Eventually, we said, actually, what would be of help is if you all could pack the bags. We'll tell you what should go in them, and then bring them to the office. And so our food program is almost 100% volunteer procured, packed and delivered, and then our volunteers and staff are delivering it to folks who are having a hard, who are trying to stay at home, basically, for one or the other reason.
Super. Well, it sounds like there are actually a lot of opportunities for people to get engaged in the things you've talked about. So I would like to turn briefly now to Pastor Peterson and Pastor Early for some additional comments. And then we're going to break and we'll take some questions. If you have posted questions in chat or have any questions you want to post there, please do. And hopefully we'll have time to actually take live questions from attendees as well. So with that, I think Pastor Peterson, do you want to start with some comments this evening?
Sure. Do you have a prompt, something specific, or just how we support the helpline?
I think it'd be great to hear how you support Helpline. Yes.
Sure. So Queen Anne Lutheran has a long history of supporting the helpline, going back to the fact that the founding director is Pat Sobeck, one of our members, 93 strong, I believe. So we have a long heritage here that goes back decades. We support the helpline in a variety of ways. Financially, we donate to the helpline every month. We provide the setting for the, up until this year, annual fun run, which I actually, so you're looking at a guy who ran the 39-minute mile in high school. And so I decided, since it's starting at our church, I'm going to do this. And I ended up running about a 13-minute mile. So Queen Anne Helpline gives us all opportunities to improve, and I'm not an exception there. But we're very proud to be the setting where the fun run begins. We also participate in the, we have an annual coat, sock, and hat drive. And we collect clothing donations and give those to the helpline. And then finally, at the beginning of the pandemic in particular, we had a special giving drive of articles of clothing and food and so forth for the helpline. My experience of the helpline is this: when we have people come to the church who are either struggling to pay the rent or who are experiencing homelessness, one of the first resources I can turn to is the helpline. And I'm guessing Pastor Doug is probably with me on that. So when somebody comes to me, I have a discretionary fund that I can use, and we have food kits that we put together. But that's just a tiny Band-Aid on usually what's a much bigger problem. And so in some cases before the pandemic, what I would do is walk people over to the helpline. And every single time they've been received in a really gracious way. And so that's my experience firsthand. Actually, you mentioned, Kara, how people drive by the helpline and don't know it's there for decades. The first time I did that, I practically walked around the block 8 times before we finally found the right place. But when we did, we were received very kindly. And so for a pastor and my congregation, that's really one of the key ways that we work with them directly, in addition to supporting them financially and with donations, is being able to go from a situation where we can help somebody once, say with finances or bus passes or food, but then being able to get them in touch with the helpline, to plug them in, and to know that they have a much greater array of resources. I am actually kind of curious, Kara, if you have a chance to talk about this, what kind of supportive services you provide to those who live outside the zip codes. That would be, there's a very large number of people outside of our 3 zip codes that come to me and my church for help. And so one of the things that I would love to know more about is what exactly are those supportive services that you offer, so that I can help them see what benefit it would provide. Because some people are reluctant, understandably, but I really want to make sure that no matter where you live, whether it's in those 3 zip codes or outside of it, there can at least be some kind of supportive process for folks who are really, really struggling. So we will continue to support Helpline. We support a number of other charities, including New Horizons, but Helpline has been really one of our big ones, and one that we will definitely continue to support. The difference that they make for folks who see us and for the community in general is just outstanding. So we're very happy at Queen Anne Lutheran to be supporting and to continue supporting Queen Anne Helpline.
Thank you. Thanks very much. We're going to hold that question for Kara. So I wanted to turn to Pastor Early and ask for any comments that he would like to make, and then we'll circle back and have Kara answer the question about helping folks outside of the 3 zip codes. Pastor Early?
Yes, well, first of all, thank you, Paula and Beth. This is tremendously well first of all, organized and run meeting and gathering, and a tremendously needed mission in general that you all are making happen. And it brings up the issue of how vital it is for whole communities to work together. And one of the things that we've appreciated as Queen Anne Presbyterian Church is that we are smaller and in a residential neighborhood on a corner. And the majority of the people that have been involved in our congregation through its history have been within walking distance of the church, or had been at one point, got connected to it, and then maybe moved, but still come. And so that sense of neighborhood is really important. And I cannot sing the praises of Queen Anne Helpline loudly enough. I've been fortunate to be on Queen Anne for 23 years, and starting with Pat Sobek, and I see Lisa Moore in the audience as well, and now with Kara, and it just has continued to be so vital. And one of the things that was fantastic during the time that Lisa Moore was there is that our congregation and Lisa partnered together to start up the Weekend Food for Kids program, which hadn't been going in the Queen Anne neighborhood, to provide food for kids that didn't have enough food on the weekends because they were getting their meals at school. And Lisa also brought into that Ballard Food Bank, and it became so successful and so big that it sort of grew beyond at least Queen Anne Presbyterian's ability to even handle. And so it was wonderful to have it get too big for us. And so we are trying to figure out ways, and Karen and I have talked about this before and will continue, of how we can partner together. I think, Kara, early on you mentioned that we're responsible for one another, and certainly our congregation feels that. But these problems are so big, they're so large and so deeply rooted sadly in our communities, that we need to change whole structures and systems. So I'm so thankful for the presence that Queen Anne Helpline has been in the area. And again, their focus on preventing homelessness. It's just makes so much more sense to help people before they fall off the cliff. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Those are really glowing comments. And I know that Kara and her staff do a fabulous job with what seems like a very difficult problem. So before I ask Beth for questions that might have come in chat, Kara, do you want to speak to the question about what services you're providing outside the 3 zip codes that you mentioned?
Yeah, thank you, Pastor Dan, for not letting me off the hook with kind of bypassing that earlier. So I mentioned that supportive services are open to everybody. What that means, besides food, hygiene items, one of the biggest things that means is a fairly extensive men's and women's clothing bank. And so that connects to ways that people can be of help in terms of in-kind donations as well. We're always looking for especially larger sizes and especially men's clothing and shoes. And, we always remind people that, yes, it needs to be clean and in good condition, gently used. So just like, we don't accept donations of expired food and, things that have exceeded their useful life. We want people to give from the best of themselves, and not from, something that's maybe not good enough for themselves, but might be good enough for someone that's lesser than. That's not how we work. So, but clothing bank, yeah, food, clothing, bus tickets, and then resources. We know that we live in an incredibly fragmented service delivery system. And just about all of our systems are convoluted and difficult to navigate, particularly for people who are under-resourced to begin with. So we do have the 211 kind of community information line. 211 still sends people to us if they're from Renton, or, you know, for rent assistance, they'll send people from who are outside of our zip codes. So it's not perfect, but when we get calls from people that are looking for financial assistance, even, we're able to say, okay, here are some folks that, you know, here are some resources in your area. So we try to redirect people as best we can. And then, you know, in non-COVID times, people are often people are on a kind of a 30-day, they can access our supportive services every 30 days. So people mark their calendar because they can, you know, stretch their budget if they every 30 days can get a new supply of, you know, of food and clothing and just some basic things that they can take off their shopping list. So like I said, we're doing some of that with deliveries now, but it's not the same. It feels good. I mean, one of the things I noticed right away when I started at the Helpline was that our clients often came, you know, as like friends that hadn't seen each other for a while, and left, you know, feeling like, you know, happy and grateful and like, you know, love you guys, thanks, you know, see you in a month. So that really is, you know, again, it gets to kind of those systemic issues that need addressing at a larger level, but it also addresses kind of the power of community and the ways in which we are responsible for each other. So we'll operate on both levels. We'll continue to be a hub for community to give and receive, and we'll be advocating for things like, you know, rent and mortgage relief, and, you know, tenant protections and things that will help our clients. We'd like to work ourselves out of business. I think that's a good goal for the nonprofit sector in general. But we have some distance to travel between here and there.
Yeah. That actually raises a question that I wanted to ask too, is how much money do you spend annually to prevent homelessness through financial assistance? What's the dollar amount?
Yeah, so last year we budgeted 180,000, and what we will spend is closer to 200 this year. The 2021 budget will be higher because the needs are going to continue, and our upper limit will be higher as well, because actually, you know, in truth, it's because the community, our donors have stepped up, and I think I mentioned moving from being really reliant on event-based fundraising to, you know, this place of, okay, we're responsible for each other. What does that mean for you in terms of your household budget? Please join us as a monthly donor. And people have heard that. It's funny, last week I saw that we have a new website, and so a new kind of giving platform. And I noticed that one of our donors had stopped giving, and this person was a $5 a month donor. And so I Googled the person and they were a local public school teacher. And I thought, well, you know, it's tough times. And there are a lot of households that went from 2 incomes to 1, and it's no longer in their budget to be a monthly donor. So that's too bad. Then I immediately got a message from my coworker, Michelle, who said, oh, FYI, if you notice that this person dropped off, it's because they're moving. I'm helping them move to the new donor platform, and they're doubling their donation.
That's super.
So that's more typical, is that in this time, people are saying, you know, maybe that was a little conservative in terms of my investment, and I can maybe give a little bit more. So it's really heartening to see, and to it makes us feel, I think, hopeful that we actually have collectively the resources to get through this without leaving people behind.
Great, thanks. Our time is getting short here, and I want to make sure, Beth, I think you have a question from chat.
Yeah, there's a couple questions in chat.
Right.
I guess the first one was, maybe can you speak a little bit about how you partner with other organizations, including the Queen Anne Food Bank? And then secondly, how, given the need to expand beyond the zip codes, do you have, you've kind of got those 3 zip codes that are within your reach. So first, partnering with different organizations, and then secondly, expanding beyond the zip codes within your purview.
Yeah, so we are not a full service food bank, so we send people regularly to Queen Anne Food Bank and Ballard Food Bank. Ballard Food Bank operates just very similar to us in terms of financial assistance. So we partner with folks like Ballard Food Bank and St. Vincent de Paul and others to kind of be another piece of the puzzle when there's more financial assistance needed than what we can provide. So sometimes we can work together to make somebody, to make the financial assistance actually meet the whole need. The zip code question is an important one. So there's a Seattle Helpline coalition that we helped found that covers different parts of the city, but not every part of the city. So I think, it's more like educating our elected officials about where the gaps are. And so that city and county funds as well are allocated. I think there's more attention and focus on that than ever in terms of BIPOC communities being, not having the same history. So the Queen Anne Helpline was founded in 1982 by business owners, who were noticing poverty and wanted to do something about it. Well, for communities that have been historically impoverished, and on the other side of the redlining, there's not the equivalent organization, there's not the same history, and there's not the same wealth to kind of draw upon to fund something like a helpline. So there is a need for directing resources in areas that don't have the same kind of vehicles for community support.
That's great. We have a few minutes left, but I think we can take some questions from the people in attendance. If you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand and we will unmute you. Scrolling. And if we don't have any questions.
I see Deanne raising her hand.
Okay, great.
There we go. Sorry.
Yeah.
Are you taking any winter clothing donations at this point?
Yes.
I didn't know how the virus was affecting that.
Yes, thank you for asking. Yeah, it's cold outside. And we're doing those things by both delivery and office pickup. Connecting people with needs besides food as well. So yes, we are. I think First Free Methodist is doing a coat drive in the new year, and we've had support. We've had support from a variety of folks that are on this call in terms of warm weather holiday coat and warm weather drives. So yeah, we'll continue to rely on that. The needs are still there. We just are getting creative about how we get things like warm coats to the people who need them. yes, thank you for asking.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about the cliff, this eviction cliff. Are you, what are you thinking in terms of fundraising and kind of managing that both financially, but also policy wise? And what can we do as a community to support that? Because it is coming.
Yeah. So I guess the first thing I would say is make sure that we all understand that eviction is not the result of bad decisions. It's not the result of, it's the result of that disconnect between stagnant wages and rising rents. So I think sometimes it gets characterized as bad decision making, or sort of similarly to the way that people talk about homelessness as being mental health and substance abuse and lots of other issues that don't actually that kind of otherize people experiencing homelessness instead of seeing it from an economic lens. So the way that we can respond pragmatically as well as morally on a local all the way through a federal level is to kind of dig a little bit deeper, more deeply, to understand the issues and then advocate. And connect with us, because we're on that. We're part of that as well. We're through our board and staff and volunteers trying to keep people educated about what the issues are, how to reach out to your legislators, and because we can kind of meet immediate needs, but it's not qualitatively a little bit like what Pastor Dan was saying about the small Band-Aid. It's maybe a larger Band-Aid, but it's not anything transformational, which is obviously what we need at larger level. So we'll continue to talk and to learn and to push for those changes.
Okay, that's awesome.
A couple more questions in chat, Beth.
Yeah, so we had a couple more. Cara, someone asked, do you accept gift cards? And if so, are there any stores or vendors that are preferred?
Yeah, it's tricky. We do, and often what we do is like buy groceries with them. Yeah, so we don't have preferred vendors aside from like everybody shop locally. We had one of our board members is one of the owners of Queen Anne Book Company. He couldn't make Tuesday's meeting because he said he was slammed at the store. We know that it wasn't literally people crowded in the bookstore, but people shopping locally. They're providing free gift wrap and encouraging donations to the helpline in lieu of paying for gift wrap, and raising a bunch of money because people are thinking about things like, gee, if I really like having local businesses around, local restaurants, and folks who are struggling, I should support them. So I guess that would be the preference is, going back to all of us relying on one another in community. I think that's becoming very transparent, that need.
Good.
So looking at how our consumer choices are in alignment with that.
There was another question, Beth, I think. Yeah,
there was one final question about the updated financial reports, and I think we had a little bit back and forth in that. As a nonprofit, you have disclosure requirements, and maybe just it's a really exciting topic to close out on. But
yeah,
you're just asking about, or have you have the updated financial reports on your website? Are you working to get a rating by Charity Navigator?
Oh, yes. So nonprofits are required to submit a Form 990 every year, which we do. We are behind on our annual reports, which is not the same as a disclosure, but it is a way to communicate to the community about what we've been doing and who our donors are, and making that kind of bite-sized information available. So yes. I think our three staff have done a great job of kind of pivoting this past year, to stay accountable to our clients and everyone else that we're responsible for in our lives. So thank you for your patience on that front.
I'm going to have to stop now. It's about 2 minutes before 7 o'clock. We want to make sure that people can get on with their evenings, but we definitely want to thank everyone this evening. Kara, Pastor Dan, Pastor Doug, thank you so much for your comments and your great discussion. Remember to watch your emails for materials and links from this evening. We had so many things mentioned. I'm sure we'll have quite a lot of information to pass along to you with links to books to read and reports to look at and opportunities for helping. I'm sure there are many of those. So we'll also be asking for just some feedback about the presentation this evening and how you thought it went. And then finally, in keeping with the purpose of the initiative on community engagement, we want to encourage everyone to stay informed and stay in touch. And then most importantly, we invite you to get engaged in making Queen Anne a better neighborhood. So thank you all so much and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see